What lies ahead for the Hogs? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, on the Chad Morris firing at Arkansas and his record, but more importantly, what is to come in Fayetteville. Of course, like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. If you love college football, this is the place to lock it in. Chad Morris went 4-18 at Arkansas. 4-18. That's abysmal, considering that in the SEC you play 8 conference games, so you play 8 quality opponents. Consider that over the past 2 seasons, Arkansas has not even played a Power 5 opponent outside of the SEC, so they should have had, basically, I know that there are really good Group of 5 schools like Boise State, Cincinnati, Central Florida, etc., but basically based on the opponents that Arkansas scheduled in the Group of 5, they should have at least won 8 games, 4-4 the last 2 seasons out of conference. 4 wins in 22 games, 0-14 in the SEC, and most of those games were not competitive in any way. The dagger proved to be the Western Kentucky game, losing 45-19 to Western Kentucky. Let it sink in. An SEC team, not named Vanderbilt, losing to Western Kentucky 45-19. So they lose by 26 points. They were down 35-7. So it was never competitive. And just to make it a bit of a more of an insult, they lost to their former quarterback, Ty Storey, who was once the starting quarterback at Arkansas and transferred to Western Kentucky and beat their brains out 45-19. They lost earlier this season to a San Jose State program that's been one of the worst in the Group of 5 over the past few seasons, 31-24. They lost to Colorado State last season. Colorado State finished 3-9 in the Mountain West, and they beat Arkansas. The losses, embarrassing beyond description, awful. Lost to North Texas, not by a late field goal. Were blasted by North Texas last year. This program has been utterly abysmal since Chad Morris took over. All right, let's look at the program first and foremost, because Arkansas, if you just started watching college football, you young fans, in the past few seasons, you think, okay, Arkansas is what? Rutgers, Illinois, Vanderbilt? No. Arkansas is one of the top 20 programs all time in wins. Certainly owned, along with Texas, the Southwestern Conference. So look it up. The Southwestern Conference existed until 1994. I believe, off the top of my head, 1994. Arkansas left for the SEC in 1992, but they, along with Texas in particular, owned the Southwestern Conference. They won a national championship in 1964. During the time that I've watched college football from the late 70s to today, Arkansas has generally been more than competitive, not elite, but typically a top 20 to 25 program in the nation. They joined the SEC in 1992. They won the Western Division, the vaunted Western Division. They won in 1995, 02, and 06. They lost all 3 of those SEC championship games. Most recently, under Bobby Petrino, they finished at 10-3 and 11-2, number 5 in the nation, number 5 in the country in 2011. They went to the Cotton Bowl. They went to the Sugar Bowl against the likes of Kansas State, winning that game, and Ohio State in 2010. If you go back to the national championship season of 1964 and coached throughout the 70s by Frank Broyles, one of the great names in college football history, and his name probably on 75% of the buildings on campus there in Fayetteville. Lou Holtz of Notre Dame fame, of ESPN fame, coached about every team in the country: William and Mary, Minnesota, North Carolina State, Notre Dame, South Carolina. Of course, won a national championship at Notre Dame, but gained his first and greatest success outside of South Bend for Arkansas, where he finished in the top 10 in the nation 3 times at Arkansas in the late 70s and early 80s. Ken Hatfield had a nice run there. Houston Nutt had some quality seasons, and some of the SEC Western Division champions that we talk about. Most recently, after the debacle of Larry Smith, there was Bret Bielema, who was wooed away from Wisconsin after winning the Big Ten championship there. Bret Bielema was paid a lot of money to win in the SEC Western Division. I don't know that he would have based on his style of football and based on the challenges that we will get to in just a second. But Bret Bielema took over a bad football program, and it took him a couple years. He went 3-9 and 4-8. But by his second season, after they went actually 4-8 in the final John L. Smith season, 3-9 under Bret Bielema, as he wanted to pound the ball, build a Wisconsin-type offense there with fullbacks and tight ends and a massive offensive line and two tremendous running backs they had at the time in Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams. Bielema built them into a bowl-winning team his second season, went 7-6. Then they went 8-5 the following season, won a bowl game again, beat Kansas State in the Liberty Bowl. They were off to a tremendous start the next season and winning in the SEC after they finished third in the SEC Western Division in, let's see, what season would that have been? That would have been 2015. Then the next season they got off to a great start and inexplicably fell apart. They blew some games late. They lost a huge lead at Missouri, who was not a good football team that particular season, lost a 24-7 lead. And then again in a bowl game in which they led, I believe, 24-0 against Virginia Tech, they let that one slip away as well. So coming down the stretch, they completely imploded and finished with 7 or 8 wins that season. I'm taking this off the top of my head, so I might be off by a win or two. Either 8-5 or 7-6 that season. That set up the final season for Bret Bielema. A lot of injuries, a lot of close calls, and they finished 4-8. Did he deserve to be fired then? They did go 4-8, but after building and taking a step in the right direction each season under Bielema, they let him go after the 4-8 finish. They still owe the man to this day $11.9 million. Well, not quite that, because they've been paying him in monthly installments, and right now there's a bit of a grievance between he and the University of Arkansas because he's taken a defensive line coach position with the New England Patriots. So as he breached his contract, we'll leave that up to the courts. In steps Chad Morris, and he of offensive guru-mindedness fame from Clemson, from his time at SMU, in which he upgraded that program on the field in just a few seasons. So he appeared to be a fine choice. I don't even want to or need to detail how bad this football program has been over the past 2 seasons under Chad Morris. So I'm typically the guy that gives these coaches a little bit more time. Wait and see. Year 1 is actually year 0 for a Chip Kelly, in particular at UCLA. Not necessarily Willie Taggart at Florida State because he took over a top 15 roster. But for some of these programs that need a bit of an overhaul, especially since Bret Bielema had stockpiled the roster with tight ends and fullbacks, and Chad Morris wanted to open it up and install his style of offense in space, that would take some time. But he just lost control of this deal, and they are just simply not competitive, and that's not understandable. And so I believe that this firing was proactive, not reactive in regards to let's give him another season. You just can't to this degree. The last few Arkansas home games have looked like high school games with the amount of people in the stands. It is downright abysmal there. I've used that word about 10 times. This is Arkansas football in 2019, and it has to end, and they have to move on to the next guy. So I would agree with this firing. Now they owe Chad Morris $10 million. And they're still paying Bret Bielema. Chad Morris didn't even bring in good recruits. So there's a condition here or a consideration. So his first recruiting class at Arkansas was in 2018. They finished 14th in the SEC out of 14 teams, number 49 in the nation. That's not good enough in the SEC. Arkansas will never bring in top 5 or 10 recruiting classes, but they need to recruit in the top 25. They need to be able to achieve South Carolina-type recruiting success that we see under Will Muschamp. Top 15 to 25 in the nation. In Chad Morris's only full recruiting cycle in 2019, he did bring in the 10th top class in the SEC, number 23 in the nation. He was not doing well on the recruiting trail headed toward 2020. And that recruiting class, most of it, probably 75 to 80% of it is going to be signed a month from now. And right now, according to the 247 composite, Arkansas has the dead last recruiting class in the SEC and number 77 in the country. So this was a justifiable firing. Chad Morris out at Arkansas after a litany of awful losses, culminating with 4-18 and a 45-19 drubbing at the hands of Western Kentucky. 4 key names are being bantied about in the coaching search. You've got Mike Norvell of Memphis, Gus Malzahn of Auburn, who turned down the job when his buddy Chad Morris was hired, Mike Leach, Washington State, and Eli Drinkwitz, who's the current coach at Appalachian State, taking over for Scott Satterfield. The Arkansas job is a difficult one because they do win. They have won in the past. Their fan base is used to winning and believe that they can win. But it's the most difficult recruiting footprint in the SEC Western Division. One of the worst and one of the least productive in the SEC in total outside of Missouri, that has a real tough job of recruiting because of the state and the lack of football talent there. But in Arkansas, it doesn't compare to the Deep South. Does not compare to Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, and even despite there being population limitations and scarcity to a certain extent in Louisiana and Mississippi, the top-end talent in those 2 states is remarkable for the per capita challenges that they have. Not so in Arkansas. They do not produce the type of high school talent that the other states surrounding them in the SEC and certainly going west to Texas do. So they've got to do a lot of work in Louisiana and Texas in particular. And if they're not winning games, then they're not going to be able to out-recruit Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, and Texas A&M in those states. So it is a tough, tough mountain to climb, playing in the SEC Western Division, the best division in college football, and having the worst homegrown talent of any team in the division and arguably any team in the conference. It's a challenge, and they expect to win. This is not Vanderbilt. This is not even Missouri or South Carolina. This is a proud program that is used to winning, and they expect to win. Who should they hire? Mike Leach would be the interesting hire, of course. He has turned around programs at Texas Tech and Washington State. He would be able to do more with less. He's done it over and over, turned 2- and 3-star personnel into offensive juggernauts, and if he's given the right defensive coordinator, he can win there as well. They're 4-5 currently this season at Washington State. That's a program that you cannot win double digits each and every season. They have cycled down this particular season, but they're coming off an 11-2 campaign, and Mike Leach would be so fun to deal with in the SEC. Mike Leach in the SEC. Gus Malzahn has been bantied about, as I stated. He turned down the job, but parlayed that into a contract extension at Auburn. And unless that team implodes in the next month, I would expect Gus Malzahn to keep his job at Auburn. They are one of the top 10 to 15 teams in the country. The Appalachian State coach is not Scott Satterfield. It's Drinkwitz now. And therefore, he has not proven himself to the extent of Satterfield, who I thought would be a great replacement, and of course he's doing the job right now at Louisville. That leaves us with Mike Norvell. How he has not parlayed his work at Memphis into a mid-range Power 5 job, I have no idea. I don't know what he's done, but he certainly is in consideration right there. He would prove to have recruiting ties to the area. He's coaching in Memphis. There's a lot of talent in Memphis that leaves to go to the likes of Tennessee and elsewhere in the SEC, and he would have those ties in connection to the talent in Memphis that is relatively strong that they need at the University of Arkansas. So Mike Norvell to Arkansas, that would be my preliminary choice. Arkansas fans would love to know what you think and who you are eyeing as your next head coach. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe. And we will see you next time.